Biden's disastrous first week.
Mr. Reagan.
Joe Biden, as we know, on his very first day, and then again on the next few days after his inauguration, signed a variety of executive orders and directives, and he issued several memoranda to the various agencies within the executive branch that he controls. Now, it's fairly obvious that he didn't write any of these executive orders or memoranda, unless you think that that's what he was doing all those days in, his basement during his campaign when he would call a lid at like noon. Can you imagine? We all thought he was just a feeble old man who needed a nap. In reality, he was busy writing out all these executive orders, preparing for the day one of his presidency. Actually, that's probably how they'll write it in the Marxist history books of the future. But of course, we know that that is not what happened, and it's likely that Joe Biden has no idea what he's signing at all. Various conservative outlets have delved into the most outrageous of these orders, but I haven't seen a comprehensive video going through all of them in their entirety. Now, I'm not going to go through each individual order here because they can be more easily grouped by their disastrous effects on the nation. So that is how I'm going to be going through these. First up, Biden's disastrous price hikes on insulin and EpiPens. That in one moment. First, I have to sell you something. Now, it's not often you get a gift for yourself in the holidays, is it? So how does a free 22-karat American Gold Eagle coin sound? To qualify, you have to take out a precious metals IRA or 401k rollover with Noble Gold. But it makes a lot of sense right now to keep your savings and investments safe. In case the worst happens, who knows what's going to happen in the next 4 years. And because Noble Gold has helped thousands of investors keep their retirement funds safe from Washington meddling, they can clearly walk you through your options with no hard sell. They can help you protect your savings and your investments. So call 877-646-5347 and get this special coin offer. But don't procrastinate. Act now. That's 877-646-5347. Again, 877-646-5347. And make sure you mention me, Mr. Reagan, when you call. Insulin and EpiPens. One of Trump's greatest accomplishments as president was lowering prescription drug prices in America. This is a tough thing to do as a politician because pharmaceutical companies pump a lot of money into political campaigns and they lobby the hell out of the DC swamp dwellers. But Trump did it. He took on Big Pharma and he won. In fact, it was the first time in almost 50 years that drug prices actually dropped in America. And two very specific targets that Trump put in his sights were insulin and EpiPens. These are life-saving drugs, but they're expensive. So Trump signed an executive order that would effectively require community health centers to reduce the price of these drugs for low-income Americans. This was a pretty common sense executive order. But of course, everything that Trump did was somehow racist or something, and so it all had to be stopped. And that's going to be a theme with some of the stuff that Biden did the other day. A lot of it was just orange man bad, and so it all has to be stopped. I don't think there was really any kind of consideration of how valuable the orders that Donald Trump signed were. A lot of this was just virtue signaling, a message that says, things are different now. We're fixing Trump's mess. And this is truly disastrous because one surefire way to break something is to try to fix it when it isn't broken. But that's exactly what Joe Biden seems to have done. He saw that Donald Trump lowered the price of EpiPens and insulin, and he said, not in my administration. And he has put a freeze on that particular executive order, which has terrified a number of people who need those life-saving drugs. And it's sort of inexplicable. Nobody really understands why he's done this.
With headlines like Biden administration freezes Trump rule to lower insulin prices, and social media posts that say Biden is deliberately causing insulin prices to go up, and he raised the price of insulin for no reason whatsoever. So it's no surprise our Verified team is getting lots of questions like this one from Jason, who wants to know, did Biden's Health and Human Services Department freeze Trump's insulin cost-cutting plan? The answer is yes, he did.
The environment. This was some world-class virtue signaling, ladies and gentlemen. First, let's talk about fracking. I'm sure you've heard of the 100-day moratorium on fracking. This is one of the most idiotic things that Biden has done in his first few days in office. Fracking is a modern-day miracle. It's technology that has allowed America to become truly energy independent for the first time in decades. The only real problem with fracking is the hysteria that emerged at its inception. People were saying that gas is coming out of their taps. The visual of water taps set on fire was very compelling. And whenever something like this happens, there are always leeches, lawyers and journalists who they want to make a name for themselves. They want to make a quick buck. And in the case of fracking, this fracking caused methane in the water supply. This myth was popularized in a film called Gasland.
So he took his camera across the United States to discover the truth about hydraulic fracturing. Despite documented health risks and environmental impact, hydraulic fracturing is spreading across the globe.
The problem with this, of course, was that it was all fake. Fracking never caused gas to come out of the faucets. Methane does sometimes flow out of water pipes, but it's not due to fracking. It's due to something called methane migration, and it has always happened. The real issue here, of course, is that Biden very specifically and very strongly stated that he would not end fracking.
I never said I oppose fracking.
You said it on tape.
I did. Show the tape. Put it on your website.
I'll put it on.
Put it on the website. The fact of the matter is he's flat lying.
Would you rule out banning fracking?
I do rule out banning fracking.
Lie. There was a number of other environmental stuff that he signed off on, none of which he understood or even read. Joe Biden is like the severed finger of a dead security guard in a spy movie. You know what I'm talking about. A heist is being committed. The protagonist needs to get into a science lab or a vault or something like that. And there's a finger scanner. So a guard with access to the vault who was killed in a previous scene, he has his thumb cut off, and that thumb is used to gain access. Biden is that thumb, but in human form. Anyway, the vast majority of Joe Biden's executive orders do absolutely nothing to protect the environment. The Paris Climate Accord, for instance, this has been proven to be a useless virtue signal. It's so obviously useless that even the defenders of this agreement have acknowledged that it does nothing and have resorted to the argument that, and I'm not joking, it sets a good example.
The Paris Agreement alone will not solve the climate crisis. We led by example. We continued to lead by example, and that achievement encouraged dozens of other countries to set more ambitious climate targets of their own.
The idea is that if America agrees to reduce carbon emissions, then the rest of the world will see our shining example, and they'll think, wow, those Americans are just such squeaky clean good people, not pumping dirty carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Well, golly gee whiz, we want to be just like them. And then all the other countries will stop emitting carbon too. Because that's how the world works, boys and girls. Bad people become good people just because good people act good. Even though reducing carbon isn't actually good at all, but I won't get into that in this video. Anyway, point is, no, that's not how the world works. No bad guy has ever stopped being bad just because he saw a good person being good. Bad guys see good people doing good and they see opportunity to exploit the good person. That's what happens when a good person just acts good and a bad person sees it. That's what happens. Being the good guy isn't enough. You have to be smart as well. They're not being smart. They're just going, but this is the good thing. This is the thing that's the good thing. So we're going to do the good thing. And look, it's not the good thing anyway. You're doing something that somebody said was good and you want to appear good, and so you're doing it, but it's not even good.
The Paris Accord was somewhere between a farce and a fraud. What you find is they either pledged to do exactly what they were already going to do anyway, or pledged even less than that. China, for instance, said, we pledge to reach peak emissions by about 2030. Well, the United States government had already done a study to guess when Chinese emissions would peak, and their guess was about 2030. India made no pledge to limit their emissions at all. They pledged only to become more efficient, but they proposed to become efficient less quickly than they're already becoming more efficient. My favorite was Pakistan, whose pledge was to reach a peak at some point, after which to begin reducing emissions. And so you can staple those together and you can say we now have a global agreement, but what you have is an agreement to do nothing.
The Paris Climate Accord has never worked to reduce carbon emissions, and it never will. In fact, most countries have soundly ignored Paris Climate Accord. They just outright dismissed it. You never really hear that much about it, but Trump did recognize this, and he said, why are we suffocating businesses in America with these stupid regulations if we're the only ones doing it, and it makes zero positive impact on the environment at all? And he was right. The Paris Climate Accord is just a massive virtue signal that does nothing. Trump was right to step away from it, and Biden is wrong to rejoin it. But here's something about the Biden environmental orders that you probably didn't know, and this is particularly sinister. The Democrats also snuck into one of Biden's idiotic environmentalist executive orders this line: the Secretary of Energy and the Director of the Office of Management and Budget shall jointly consider whether to recommend that a replacement be issued. The replacement that this line is referring to is the replacement of another one of Trump's executive orders on bulk power system electric equipment coming in from China. Now, the reason for this, of course, is that we don't want to give China the power to shut off our power grid. Keeping this Trump-era order in place seems like a no-brainer.
Go ahead all the way in the back,
Hi.
And then we'll come to you, sir. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. In an executive order that the president signed last week, he also suspended a Trump administration executive order that was particularly aimed at keeping foreign countries, specifically China, from interfering in the U.S. power grid. But he suspended that for 90 days in that executive order last week. Given what you said about China today, why did he do that, especially related to something so critical to our national security as the power grid?
I think the president's view on our relationship with China, I tried to do my best to convey to all of you. I'll have to check on that specific piece, and we'll circle back with you directly.
But consider that Hunter Biden has been involved in several business dealings with the CEFC China Energy chairman, Yi Jianming. And an investment firm owned by Hunter Biden funneled millions of dollars into the China General Nuclear Power Corporation, a state-owned power company who's actually stolen nuclear technology for decades from America for use by the Chinese Communist Party. This is precisely the type of concerns that we had when it looked like Joe Biden might, through a crooked election facilitated by mail-in voting implemented by using COVID as an excuse, a pandemic that came out of China, might win the election. And here it is, concerns justified. But I do think that there's an ulterior motive with all of this environmental stuff and rejoining the Paris Climate Accord. It's the same reason why we're rejoining the WHO. Biden's controllers want to send the message that we're once again a member of the global community. We're no longer America first. We're part of the greater drum circle of smug nations working together to create a better world for all of us. The problem with that, of course, is that many of these international organizations have devolved into useless symbols of positive change as opposed to robust engines for positive change. Most of them simply release white papers recommending left-wing political policies, which is fine for Democrats, except every Democrat should also be wary of this, because once you subscribe to the recommendations of an international organization like the WHO or NATO or the UN, well, then you're no longer acting in the best interest of the people of your nation. And much of the time, these international organizations are filled with morons, or worse, they've been infiltrated by representatives from countries acting in bad faith.
Back in January and February, the World Health Organization, which every nation pays into, like the United Nations, it's there to help us. We pay for it, we subsidize it, but it was actively working against our interests and as a propaganda arm for the Chinese. It's been completely corrupted, much as the United Nations has been completely corrupted, Peter.
Will the WHO consider Taiwan's membership? Hello?
I'm sorry, I can't hear. I couldn't hear your question.
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question.
No, that's okay. Let's move to another one then.
Right, because I'm actually curious on talking about Taiwan as well, on Taiwan's case.
Finally, when the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic after more than 100 countries already had infection. And you know, and I know, Lou, that it was because China was able to exert pressure on their puppet at the WHO, Tedros.
China is one example, constantly trying to manipulate these organizations to recommend policies that work in China's favor. But I'm sure Biden is not only unconcerned by that, he very likely embraces it. Economic suffocation. It's been estimated that Biden has killed over 70,000 jobs just by revoking the permit for the Keystone Pipeline alone. If you think that sounds like a lot, consider that by outlawing fracking, he would kill 19 million jobs. We are teetering on the edge of economic disaster in America because of the overreaction to the coronavirus by Democrat politicians and the lockdowns and the other measures that they imposed. And instead of doing things to free up and revitalize the economy, which is what Trump did the moment he took office, Biden is clamping down on everything. It's almost like those controlling him want to destroy the economy. In another pivot from economic pragmatism into the world of sheer idiocy, Biden has signed an executive order that restores the collective bargaining power for federal workers. This is, of course, disastrous. He's also requiring a $15 minimum wage for companies with government contracts. Now, this clearly sets the stage for a $15 minimum wage nationwide, which would drive many companies to outsource. And guess who would benefit from such legislation? Well, you guessed it, China. Funny how everything Biden does seems to help China. Strange that. All right, let's move on to COVID. Biden created a position called the COVID Response Coordinator. That's going to be fun. I'm sure that's going to help a whole lot. He's also created a mask mandate on federal property, which I'm sure you're aware of, because as soon as he implemented this mandate, he immediately broke it.
Why weren't President Biden and all members of the Biden family masked at all times on federal lands last night if he signed an executive order that mandates masks on federal lands at all times?
At the inaugural
Memorial, yes.
I think, Steve, he was celebrating an evening of a historic day in our country, and certainly he signed the mask mandate because it's a way to send a message to the American public about the importance of wearing masks, how it can save tens of thousands of lives. We take a number of COVID precautions, as you know here, in terms of testing, social distancing, mask wearing ourselves, as we do every single day. But I don't know that I have more for you on it than that.
But as Joe Biden often talks about, it is not just important the example of power, but the power of our example. Was that a good example for people who are watching who might not pay attention normally?
Well, Steve, I think the power of his example is also the message he sends by signing 25 executive orders, including almost half of them related to COVID. The requirements that we're all under every single day here to ensure we're sending that message to the public. Yesterday was a historic moment in our history. He was inaugurated as President of the United States. He was surrounded by his family. We take a number of precautions, but I think we have bigger issues to worry about at this moment in time. Go ahead, Anita.
And his press secretary also broke the executive order while trying to explain why Biden broke the executive order. I mean, obviously, this is a moronic mandate. It's so moronic, neither Biden nor his staff can follow it, or even, it appears, to try to follow it. It's one of those things that Biden's doing to say, look, I'm fixing the mess that Trump made. Problem with that statement, of course, is that Trump didn't make a mess. He, in fact, did an amazing job. So in trying to appear to fix things, Biden is just signing a bunch of pretend edicts that actually do nothing. It would be sad if it weren't actually effective at tricking the gullible CNN viewers out there. Now, to put the nature of this illusion into perspective, consider the fact that Biden's ambitious goal to get 1 million Americans vaccinated each day has already been met by Donald Trump. But the media is not helping. They are doing their best to help gaslight the public into believing that every milestone is a massive Biden achievement, in contrast with Donald Trump's dismal failures. Now let's move on to racist stuff. Biden's controllers had him end something called the 1776 Commission. What is the 1776 Commission? Well, basically, some racist degenerate wrote an article in the New York Times, and this racist degenerate called their article the 1619 Project. And since writing that article, this whole thing, this 1619 Project, has become a massive undertaking to establish a new standard in the American education system. This new standard would replace the old method of teaching history, which the 1619 Project folks think is too Eurocentric. It would replace it with a more Afrocentric perspective of American history, teaching all about how the efforts of Black Americans created all the prosperity this country has ever enjoyed, and that Black people have basically been sidelined and mistreated all this time, and that white people owe Black people everything from acknowledgement of all their hard work creating everything to all the wealth that's been accumulated in the country. Black people have done everything and deserve everything, and white people have merely stolen everything and have abused Black people and used them for their genius and labor for the past 400 years. I mean, this is all, of course, false. This is what's generally referred to as pseudo-history. It's fake, it's made up, it's all a lie. And again, it's not just some right-wing criticism of left-wing ideas. The 1619 Project has been absolutely lambasted by just about every serious historian on the planet, and yet the developers of this idiotic 1619 Project and the New York Times have teamed up to inject this absolute nonsense into the minds of young Americans everywhere. It's absolutely reprehensible. So Trump brilliantly developed the 1776 Commission as a response to the 1619 Project. Instead of filling kids' heads with lies and propaganda, the 1776 Commission was supposed to be the first step in teaching kids real history. And Biden canceled that because we can't have kids knowing real history. That would be awful. We can't have kids thinking that white people ever had any positive effect on the world. Oh no, that would be terrible. Who cares if it's true? That's not the point. They have to be demonized because racist left-wing psychos want it that way. Reinstating critical race theory. I honestly can't state strongly enough how utterly detestable this critical race theory bullshit is. So you know what? I'm just going to roll a clip.
White people are racist. So I put this up because I really want any white person in the room to know up front that this is what we're dealing with, that it's not going to be this coddling of white tears and what that looks like. We're not going to discuss, oh, maybe some of us have worked it out. No, you're always going to be racist, actually. So even when you're on your path to trying to figure out how to be a better human being, because I believe that white people are born into not being human, like that actually, instead of people of color and black folks being dehumanized, that actually everyone is dehumanized off rip within white supremacy, that y'all are born into a life to not be human, and that's what y'all are taught to do, to be demons. So in this particular way, white people are all racist.
Yeah, so that racist horse was being propagated through the offices of the federal government, and so Trump naturally banned it, as any sensible president would. And then Biden's idiot controllers, because they're virtue signaling hive mind pod people, they moved the string that controls Biden's writing hand and they had him sign an executive order to reinstate it. Because we need all the white people to know that they're bad, and the black people need to know that they're all good. Because that's going to unify the country. More divisive identity politics horse. Opening the border. So Biden has halted all deportations for 100 days. He's also including illegal aliens in the census. He's fortified DACA because let's just make sure that border jumpers have a strong incentive to bring their kids over illegally. And Biden has ended, quote, harsh and extreme immigration enforcement, which I suspect means all immigration enforcement. Sure, that's going to end well. Biden has also stopped construction on the wall, which I think everybody expected. And of course, Biden has promised that he's going to give amnesty to over 11 million illegal aliens currently living in America. 11 million is meant to indicate all illegal aliens in America today, but there are actually far more than that. And this has already incentivized a new caravan of immigrants to start charging their way up from Guatemala toward the border.
Because they're having a new president, where's Biden? He's going to help all of us. He's given us 100 days to get to the U.S., and give us legal mental paper.
Now, upon hearing about this caravan, Biden's people recognized the PR disaster that was literally approaching, and they turned the knob that moves Joe Biden's jaw in order to make him say, now is not the time. And it worked. The caravan just stopped and everybody turned around and went home. No, actually telling the would-be border crossers that now is not the time, shockingly, had zero effect. Because guess what, leftist open borders lunatics? Incentives actually work. Positive and negative incentives are real things, and people really do react to them in ways that you can anticipate. Virtue signaling on gay stuff. So Biden has signed an executive order intending to combat discrimination of sexual orientation / gender identity. Okay, sounds like that might be a good thing in 1993. But how many people are discriminated against by sexual orientation these days? Not many. Maybe gender identity, okay, but I don't think this tends to be because Bob wants to be called Barbara. I think it's because Bob has started to wear poorly applied lipstick and hanging around the ladies' room, and he's creeping out everyone in the office. And one major part of this new executive order, the thing that most people are talking about, is that men are now supposed to be permitted to compete in women's sports because some men who call themselves transsexuals claim to believe that they are women inside.
This is how I feel inside.
What this essentially does is it destroys women's sports. Many feminists have been fighting against this, naturally. The television show South Park illustrates this better than I ever could.
Now, this is the first year that a trans woman is in the competition. How do you feel about that?
Amazing. We're all inspired this woman's competing.
Miss Swanson, how does it feel to be competing today?
I'm gonna roll up the other women here, and I'm gonna smoke them. I am the strongest woman this state has ever seen.
So basically, women can compete in sports, but they will literally never win anything ever again, except maybe rhythmic gymnastics.
Such awareness of where the hand apparatus is in space.
Now, this is taken seriously. There will be no women's sports in the future. There are only so many spots on sports teams. You'll eventually get a varsity men's team. You'll get a varsity men pretending to be women's team. You'll get a JV men's team, and you'll get a JV men pretending to be women's team. Women's sports scholarships will all go to men pretending to be women. I mean, look, I never thought that women's sports should be taken so damn seriously anyway. But come on, this is just cruel, and it doesn't make any sense. The idea that gender is a social construct and that there are no real differences between men and women except for perceptions that we've been brainwashed to believe over generations in our toxically masculine patriarchal society, this idea is going to be disproven literally every single day now as men compete against women in sports. And I'm just going to say it, all right? Men are physically stronger than women. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry if anyone was triggered by that, but it's true. On average, the average man has more muscular strength, bone density, tougher tendons and ligaments than do women on average. I'm sure there are many people in America, if they heard that, they'd want to cancel me, but it's true. You can't go into a doctor's office and be diagnosed with ovarian cancer if you're a man, because men don't have ovaries. Men and women are different, and we must be treated differently by medical professionals because of that. Honestly, this is such a stupid topic that I feel like it's kind of pointless going into it. But sadly, we need to discuss it because this is a real executive order really signed by President Biden, the puppet, reversing everything that Trump did. Okay, so one memorandum demands a freeze on any new or pending regulation issued by Trump. This one is hard for me to criticize because apparently this is like a standard thing that tends to be done with every new administration. So I don't think that we can read too much into this. However, I do think that a lot of what's going on with, halting Trump executive orders, this all seems like an extension of the left-wing paranoia that Trump was some kind of evil despot who was going to usher in an era of fascist totalitarianism, reinstating the authority of the white male and viciously oppressing women and black people and gays and Muslims and immigrants. Of course, Trump never did anything like that. But I think the Democrats feel that they've got to maintain this illusion by dramatically shutting down any and all executive orders signed by Trump. In summary, this is political theater, ladies and gentlemen. All of Biden's executive orders, memorandums, and directives, these are all cheap parlor tricks to reinforce fear and hate against Trump and conservatives and to reinforce the trust gullible Americans have in Democrats. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how Democrats are going to destroy the country. It's twisted, but sadly, it will be effective. Democrats prey on the gullible, and that's how they get power, and that's how they keep power. So next time you hear your leftist cousin defend Biden or speak ill of Trump, don't get angry, just pity them. Because they really do believe the nonsense that MSNBC and CNN are telling them. It's not that they're ignorant, it's just they know so much that is not so. Good night.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant, it's just that they know so much that isn't so. Now,